One early June day in 2002, I was walking out to my studio. At the base of a large silver maple tree, I saw something moving. I at first couldn't tell what it was. As I looked closely, I saw it was a baby bird. Sometimes baby birds fall out of the nest on their own, but other times they are dislodged by predators, or even the parents who toss them out on purpose based on some instinct nature provides. This was not good. I picked it up and brought it back to the house. I knew the chances of it surviving were few, but if I left it on the ground, its chances were 0. Several times in the past, Lil and I had found these rejects from the nest. They are very hard to rescue because of diet and the time involved. We in fact had tried this a number of times, and the birds never lasted more than a few days. But our veterinarian had suggested we try feeding canned dog food to the nestling, and so we decided to give it another try. We found that if we put him in a pan of water, he knew how to take a bath. I began to take him out to my painting studio during the day. He often sat and even slept on my shoulder while I worked. He began to awkwardly fly after a few weeks, and he would explore every nook and cranny of whatever room he was enclosed in. He began to spend a lot of time looking out the windows. Our goal was to enable him to live in the wild, so we devised a plan to get him acclimated to nature once his flying skills became good enough. I moved the laundry rack he'd been using for perching and a few other familiar items into our pasture. When we first took him out, we had no idea if he would stay or just disappear. But to our relief, he stayed nearby, still dependent on us to put food in front of him, with that flapping gesture common to baby birds. It began to seem that it might just work. I brought him in every night and took him out in the morning. We began to feed him less often, trying to encourage him to find food on his own. The little girl across the street said, "You should name him Leroy for some reason," so that's what we called him.
Come on.
But he was becoming more and more independent, even starting to associate with other birds. I was glad to see him living naturally, and every morning I'd wonder if he'd still be there. I tried to get him to pick up food on his own, which he eventually mastered. He also would peck at things like ants on the ground.
Yeah, the boy.
One evening, he went to the top of a tree and wouldn't come down to my calls. It seemed as if he wanted to stay out all night. With a certain trepidation, I went in and just hoped he'd be there in the morning. When I went out the next morning, I was very relieved to find him fly down and greet me, begging for food. he began to spend the whole day flitting around in trees, and I got him to fly to my studio window for feedings.
Feeding time. Enough. There you go.
One morning, after a night of severe thunderstorms, he didn't show up. I called and clicked, making a grackle sound, but he was nowhere to be seen. Not knowing if he was okay was very hard to deal with, but Lil and I chose to believe that he'd just finally gone off to live as he should. For several days, though, I couldn't walk out to my studio without calling his name, and I left the window open, hoping to hear that fluttering sound and see him sitting on the windowsill. Then after 3 days, I walked out one morning and called, and I heard him. He flew down and landed on our milk house roof. I called excitedly to Lil, and she cheered his return. He landed near us and cawed a few times, but he didn't want food. He didn't flap his wings. Instead, he lifted off and flew up into the silver maple under which I had originally found him 5 weeks earlier. He called out and then flew off across the pasture into the distance. That was the last time we saw Leroy, but at least now we knew he was doing fine.